Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. War and corruption plague America and turned it into a police state. A resistance member, Algier Dyer, breaks out of political prison and reunites with her husband and daughter. The family, on the run, takes refuge in a safe house with an evil past. Yes, folks, this is our raw reaction review for History of Evil. Alrighty, Luke. So we are here with another Shudder original review. Yes, they have been killing it so far these first couple of months with just a constant stream of original films and just new content for us around every corner. I know end of last year was only a couple of films that were Shudder originals that we got to check out, but yeah, I mean, it just seems like there's one or two every month now, which is great. And we just talked about stop motion, which we really enjoyed. That one's still coming to theaters this weekend. But if you can't make it out to the theater and you want to see what's on Shudder, they do have this for you, and that is History of Evil, which is a very different kind of horror film, at least very different from stop motion, in the sense of this one's kind of got a lot of stuff going on in the sense of a few different topics to cover here. It's kind of a post-apocalypse, police state, kind of the vibe to it. Like you had mentioned, Last of Us, Walking Dead kind of vibes to it right before we started recording. And I would say that's very accurate. It kind of leads into that. But then we do kind of fall into a little bit more of the traditional horror sense. So, Luke, tell me, how you feeling about History of Evil?
Going into this one, I didn't really know what to expect. I hadn't seen a trailer for this one. I went in really cold. I think maybe prior to turning this on, I just read a little synopsis. So I was kind of knowing what I was going to be in store for in terms of, that kind of dystopian future, as well as, this supernatural force. And I was intrigued by the mashup. I wasn't really sure how they were going to be able to pull it off. But I was definitely intrigued because I don't think you see a lot of stuff like this. And seeing a lot of this dystopian stuff that we've had over the past decade, I'm always looking for something, that twist to it where it's going to bring us something new. So I was definitely intrigued with this one. Going into it, I will say I found myself enjoying it more so as they were putting the pieces together, and then overall the outcome I wasn't necessarily satisfied with. It kind of started losing me as we kept going throughout. But it was a noble effort, I gotta say.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And I say that in the sense of having kind of the goal to mash more of your stereotypical haunting style horror film with this kind of police state, fascist regime, kind of takeover post-apocalypse kind of vibe. You don't see very many movies like this. I can't think of any off the top of my head that I could say are this. And that's definitely something you can give somebody. I think this was a really strong concept. I just think overall, as far as the execution goes, it feels very surface level. I think in every sense of the way. I feel like none of the scares really, like got me to this point of feeling creeped out or got me feeling kind of, earned in a sense. It felt like, okay, we're seeing, haunting stuff, but it's the same old really. I felt like they didn't do anything too new with that part of it. And then as far as the the political side of it, I would say the intro, the opening, very effective sequence. I liked that. I liked how they kind of had to maneuver through almost like a blockade. I thought that was cool how they set that up. And then it kind of just again gets very surface level, very stereotypical. And yeah, I just kind of found myself being very middle ground with this movie by the end of it.
Yeah, and kind of mashing in both those kind of ideas of this police state as well as the supernatural element. I did like for the most part how they balanced it, because as we start off, we're in this kind of dystopian, not so distant future, and yeah, we run into these conventionals. It's a blockade. We've seen this a billion times. I do like there is just a little tidbit of our one of our police officers in a sense, holding a kind of like tablet with the Bible. And I thought that was rather interesting to kind of really hammer
Yeah.
home, without beating anyone over the head with anything of, okay, this is interesting. We're kind of sprinkling that garnish. And as we do move into those supernatural elements, because this primarily does take place in a house with this family, there is this kind of police state element that does keep presenting itself, rearing its ugly head in a sense, and reminding us that we are in this kind of dystopian future, which I did like that kind of garnish there, where it wasn't necessarily too heavy-handed, and then it plays along throughout the rest of the film. Going into your points with the supernatural elements, I'll say, yeah, they again run really into the conventional style of what we do see with a lot of supernatural forces. There are a few scenes in here that did intrigue me. There is a couple of great audio tidbits for me. There is one that is of I guess the sound of someone breathing through a plastic bag, I guess you is the only really way I could say it. And it happens off screen. And again, you're building up to a scare. And I will say that was really effective for me. It's something where, as a human being, you kind of know that sound and
Mhm.
you can kind of think of what you're in store for. So the tension in those little elements like that. And then there's another audio bit with the chain. And when our male character is talking with another character in there, you can kind of figure out as you're putting those pieces together. Sorry, I'm not diving too deep into the story here, but I think those elements were fairly strong. But then as we get into the actual scares, that visually they really do fall into those conventional elements as well.
Yeah, and I think overall, for me on this one, I was very intrigued again by the concept. I think a lot of people will compare, just from the surface of looking into what this movie bills itself as, is kind of like the recent Alex Garland movie that's coming out, Civil War. It's gonna feel like that for, I would say probably the first half hour, and then once we get to this house, it's like that's when the movie like completely shifts in a way, and then like you said, it rears its ugly head with this police state stuff every once in a while. I did like the touch with the Bible, like you had said. I thought that was creative and cool. I think that they really could have explored that, but I just feel like they had two ideas here that didn't necessarily mesh very well together, that they should have at least explored it a little bit deeper. I think they should have maybe picked one side to focus on or give us a little bit. It just felt like it was kind of working against itself for me. And I at the end of the day, I think all the acting in it was pretty serviceable. Nobody really stands out as blowing me away or anything, but I did feel like, I think his name was Paul Wesley,
Yes.
had a good bit of charisma to him. Definitely, again, I really enjoyed some of the parts where he kind of has to play up the whole. He's with kind of the bad guys in a sense, like he's kind of like on their side. How he can kind of like turn it on and just kind of talk to these like roughnecks and other fascist characters. So it's like I enjoyed that aspect of it, but for the most part, everybody else I would say was just pretty serviceable. Nothing really wowed me in this. I really didn't feel any kind of anything more than, I guess, like you kind of compared it to The Walking Dead. I would very much say that that's about where I would put this at on the level.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, I think Paul Wesley did a fairly well done job. I think he's got this kind of awkward charisma that, as being a father, but then as his story arc continues, you see that less and less. And I do like that kind of trajectory that he was on. And then I did enjoy, I guess I would say, the family dynamic or lack of family dynamic, because of this kind of the relationship between the husband and wife already seem distant as we're
Yeah.
getting together, and then it just kind of grows further and farther apart.
Mhm.
So I like the way they presented that, because it did feel a little realistic to me, in terms of being a political prisoner in a sense, and just getting out and being kind of focused on that kind of, you want to lead, and then trying to come in and being a mother. They kind of switch those roles as what we're used to seeing. So I thought that was rather interesting. But again, when we're here for the horror and that kind of tension buildup, I think it is lacking in a handful of aspects there. So I don't think you're going to get too much in the way of originality for the most part. I think you're going to run into a lot of that conventional style, whether it be that kind of police state element or even the supernatural force.
Yeah, and I think really where I land on this is I'm going to give this a proceed with caution. Definitely seems like you enjoyed this a little bit more than me, but I think we're right about the same when it comes to our overall feelings on the film.
Absolutely. I'm gonna go with worth a watch in here. I think there's a handful of good things that you can pick out of here. But as you go further along, I really feel like there's a jump, especially toward the end, that I just felt was it did not hit. It kind of leaves you wanting more and not in a good way. So I'm gonna say worth a watch. I think there are some good performances, some decent dynamics in here. So it's going to be on Shudder. So
Hmm.
if you're again, what is this, an hour 30, or maybe a
Yeah, it's like
little
an
bit
hour and
over?
33 minutes.
So if you're looking for something to do over the weekend, I would say at least you can give History of Evil a watch one time, at least for me.
Yeah, and I think that it's definitely like you said, it's on Shutter. If you have a subscription, it's not going to cost you anything extra. It is one of those things. Again, I think it's an interesting pickup for Shutter, and I think that there are going to be a lot of people that actually do find themselves really liking this concept. I just don't think it worked for me too well. But I could definitely see people looking at this and saying that this is one of the more unique films they've seen this year. And yeah, I think that it will find an audience. I think that this is going to have people who maybe even call this one of their favorites just because of, again, kind of taking that risk of blending the kind of supernatural horror with the kind of more post-apocalyptic style film. But I think that it's just gonna take time and we're just gonna have to wait and see. But yeah, this is hitting Shutter this Friday, so let us know if you guys got a chance to check it out or if you're planning on checking it out. And yeah, I think between this and stop motion, I'm gonna say go out to the theaters and check out stop motion. But if you can't, this is there for you as well. But yeah, that's gonna wrap us up here for History of Evil. I almost called it Shudder of Evil. Look how funny. Anyway, yeah, I'm getting tongue tied. But other than that, yes, we do have a couple of new reviews up on the channel, so check those out. I'm talking stop motion, as well as we do have another live stream coming up this Monday with our boy Evan over at Rockland Graves and our buddy Alex over at Beyond the Void podcast. So keep your eyes out for that. Can't wait to figure out what those topics are going to be, and we're going to definitely be posting about it soon. And yeah, other than that, guys, that's going to wrap it up here for me. So until next time, I am Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live.